We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Look at that. That's beautiful. It's got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you.
Here we have this year's participants in the 8th annual Tal Memorial, currently being played in Russia. Hi folks, John Cordisco back again with another great chess video for you. My buddy Carl still on a tear. I'll tell you, 4.5 points out of the last 5 in the 8th annual Tal Memorial. This game was played today, Wednesday, June 19th, 2013. It's round 6. Current world champion Vishy Anand playing the white pieces, and Nakamura, my buddy from the United States, playing the black pieces. It's going to be a real pay. I got to tell you, Carl's on a tear. And not because I'm a Carl fan, he just is. And this is the kind of chess he's capable of playing. And like any other sport, the key to anything is consistency. I hope he makes it to the rest of the tournament, even past here. I think he's reached a level now that he's wanted for a long time. If I'm not mistaken, after this game, he'll either be number 4 or number 5 in the world. Pretty cool. And I'll tell you the truth, I think Kamsky's 11, just got out of 10. And Fabiano Caruana's number 4, I think, or 3. Tell you the truth, Fabiano is really an American, and Kamsky is. So I'll say, for all intents and purposes, out of the top 10 players in the world, 3 of them are really Americans. And I think that's pretty awesome, considering chess isn't nearly as big here as it is in Eastern Europe. Anyway, folks, let's get to the game itself. It's a real pay. Vishy Anand is white, and Carl Nakamura is black. We all know the real pay openings pretty well by now, or we should. G6. It's funny they show a third move for black unusual. That Fianchetto dark squared bishop is interesting, I will say that. In fact, I might try that myself. I kind of like it. Bishop to G7, C3. Not doing a lot of things. You're going to eventually go pawn here, and you want a pawn guarding it, and also, if you have to have an escape square for your bishop once it gets hit by the A-pawn. A6, but he took. Interesting. Takes. D4, pawn takes, pawn takes. It's an interesting position here. I love black center, or excuse me, white center. Plus I also love the fact that black's got all kinds of maneuvering. His bishop is now free. he does need to develop his knight and then he'll castle, and I think black is fine. Knight to e7. h3. That's probably to avoid the pin here. It'd be very annoying pin there with the light squared bishop being gone. Castles. Knight to c3. h6. Trying to keep any pieces out of this square. Queen to b3. As we can see, right on the enemy king. It's a good spot. g5. I find that to be a very interesting move. And I think it caught Vichy off guard. That's just my guess. It's probably standard stuff, but I haven't seen it that much. And it takes a lot of guts to do that. Rook to d1. Looks like white's going to prepare to go d5. So black has to, goes to b6, a4. Black's pretty cramped up right here, but I don't think he's too bad. I mean, he's got a lot of scope with his light squared bishop. Instead of b6, I think h4 is worth considering. G takes, knight takes, bishop e6. After a4, a5. White's got a pretty active position here. And I'll tell you the truth, I've got my Fritz 13 computer off screen here. It shows a little under a half a pawn advantage for white. I think black is more than okay here. Bishop to e3. Knight to g6. d5. Here comes the push. White's making his move here. Gain some space. c5 by Carl. Knight to b5. g4. Should have saw that move coming, Fishy. And I'll tell you the truth, that's a hell of a move. I like that a lot. Let's see what the computer says. The computer gives suggested moves: bishop to d7 and knight to e5. I like that g4 a lot. He has to take. He has no choice. He moves a knight anywhere. We'll just say here even. Pawn takes. Pawn has to take, and white's in a lot of trouble. H takes, bishop takes. Not only develops the bishop with tempo, but pins the knight against the rook. Bishop to d2. Queen to d7. White's still got a very good position here, though. Rook a to c1. I think it might have been considered as to move the rook back to e1. It would have went c6, d takes, queen takes, knight to h2, hitting the light squared bishop. After rook a to c1, c6, got to go after the pawn center. He has to take. Queen takes, bishop to c3. Now let's take a look. I think what would be worth looking at is queen to e3 for white. So queen to e3, rook f to e8, rook to e1, bishop takes, rook to b1. It's a slight advantage for black, but it's about a quarter pawn advantage. After bishop to c3, bishop takes f3, g takes. Now I gotta say, I know there's quite a few pieces off the board. Half of the minor pieces are gone and almost half the pawns. But I'll tell you the truth, if you're white, look at your king. And you're playing somebody that's young and has to win. Rook a to d8, rook takes, rook takes. Instead of maybe rook takes, bishop takes, king f1, queen e6 might have been worth looking at. After rook takes d8, rook takes d8, rook d1. Don't let him have the open file. He can't do it. Rook to d7. Now Carl's a little trickier. Rook takes, queen takes. Now right now it's a tiny, minute advantage for black. I still don't like the king position on white, but I'll tell you, black's not so hot either. He's got a bishop bearing down on him, and he's got the queen bearing down on him, and he's got the knight within close proximity. So white's doing okay too. Queen to d5, queen takes, e takes. At this point, I think I'm going to make a comment concerning some of my comments concerning Karl Nakamura. If you go back maybe 2, 3, 4 months ago on some of my videos, I'm a fan of Karl's, I'll admit that. But if you go back, I was making the point that I think his time is coming up, and that was several months ago. And this is not to say I'm patting myself on the back for being right. Or maybe I'm not right at all, we'll have to see. But I think this is a Karl's time. He's just exactly the right age. Him and Carlsen are close to the same age. And all us chess players, even the average players like myself and 99.9% of the people that watch this, it's about the skill, there's no question, in your playing strength. But a large portion of your game is mental. And I think Hikaru at this level has gone over that small hump that he takes, that he can say that he can play with anyone in the world. And I don't mean in an arrogant sense. He can hold his own against anybody in the world. I think he's proven that. But the thing is, though, you have to prove it to yourself. It's nice that your peers know it, but until you prove it to yourself, it doesn't really matter. And I think Hikaru is just on the cusp of that right now. If not, he's just over it now. Where he thinks, on any given day, he can battle with the best of them in the world. He always could, but at this level, consistently, it's like Fabiano Caruana. I think I saw him a couple of years ago at Vikings A in an interview, and he looked like the deer in the headlights look. He was scared to death. And I remember Fabiano saying, well, with these guys, if I'm playing with black, I just play to hold. And if I'm playing with white, I just try to play. And now these guys, he's part of these guys, and so is Hikaru. And I think this is their time, especially Hikaru. I think he's matured and grown up a lot in the last few years, as we all do. We're all young. I'm 56 years old, and we all could pick things out when we were young that we kind of maybe a little embarrassed about or put our head down. But we all go through this. It's part of life. It's part of growing up. And I think Hikaru is at that stage now. He's just at the top of the hump. He just needs to just push himself over it. And I think this is his time. And I'll get off my soapbox and we'll continue on with the game. After he takes d5, bishop takes, pawn takes. Now right now it's about a pawn and change advantage for black. And I'll tell you, this is tough. White's got 1, 2, 3 isolated pawns. Granted, black has them too, but he's got these connectors up here. And there's knights on the board, which makes it 100 times more difficult and technical. At least with bishops, you know what color squares the bishops are going to be on. And this is like mind-boggling stuff, at least it is for me. Karl goes knight to e5, knight to d6, king to f8, and king to h2. That, I think, was Vishy's mistake. What he should have gone is f4 to kick the knight. Then with knight to d3, knight to c6, knight takes, d6. And I'll tell you the truth, I'm looking at the score here. After black's move king to f8, it's about a quarter pawn advantage for black. After king to h2, it jumps to over 1. And that's a lot for these guys. King to f7, knight to c8 check. Another question mark. I don't think I've ever gone over a game or tried to analyze a game where Vishy Anand, the world champion, has made 2 question mark moves in a row. Now I don't know if Vishy's just tired or he just miscalculated. It's pawn knight endings are tough, even for these guys. And I think what he should have done instead of knight to c8 check, is knight to f5 check, king to d7, knight to e3, knight takes h6 wouldn't be too good, because after knight takes h6, b5, and knight to f5, b takes a, and white's got a world of hurt. A world of hurt. After knight to c8 check, king to d7, knight takes b6 check, king to c7, f4, kicking the knight. Right now, for whatever's worth department, it's over almost a 4-point advantage for black, and he's down a pawn. So if you want to know why, rather than go through a million different scenarios, pause the video here and do some analyzing. What I do is I'll look at something like this, and I'll set up my board right in front of my computer screen, and I'll start going through it. Or you can have a laptop maybe, or another computer with a screen on it. After f4, knight to f3 check, king to g2. Now king to g3 would have went knight to d2, knight to a8 check, king to b7, king to h4, king takes, king to h5. What a huge advantage for black. After king to g2, knight to d2, if black had played knight to e1 check first, king would have got king to f1, king takes b6, knight to d2, king to a8 check, king to b7, d6, king to c6. Of course, if he takes the knight, goes d7, and black loses. Knight to c7. At least the knight can escape now. King takes, knight to b5 check, king to d5, king to g3. It's an almost 3-point advantage. It's gone down a little bit, but it's almost a 3-point advantage for black. King to c4. Maybe a better move might have been knight to c4 instead. After knight to c4, another huge mistake from Vichy. This is a double question mark move. He went king to d6 check. Now for us it looks like a normal move, but it's not. What he should have done instead was f5, knight to e4, king to f4. What happens now is king takes c3, knight takes f7, c4. Here comes the pawn. f5. If white had taken the pawn, it would have went d3, knight to g4, c3, and white is doomed. After f5, king to d4. Because I remember it was about 2 moves before this. I came into the game. I was watching the commentators on ICC, and I was also watching the game live on Play Chess. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Carl's going to do it again. Knight to d6, king to e5. Can't take the pawn, of course. It's guarded by the knight. Knight to b5, king takes, f3, h5. In here is where Vichy Anand, the current world champion, resigns. We could go through a couple of moves. I'll do them on the computer. Suggest king to f2, h4, knight to d4 check, his only saving grace, king to e5, knight to e2, knight to b1, king to g2, C3. King to H3. C2. F4 check. King to F6. King takes H4. Knight to C3. Knight to C1. And white's really trying to hold on, but it's not going to work. Knight takes A4. King to G4. Knight to C5. He's bringing the knight around. Knight to A2. A4. King to F3. Of course, Vishy knew it would come out like this. That's why he resigned. But for us guys that are mere mortals, I'm going to play it out. King to E2. Pawn, queen. Knight takes. Knight takes. King to D2. Knight to E2. Important. King to D3. Knight takes check. King to C2. Here comes the king. You're thinking, oh, he's going to be able to stop the pawn. It's going to be a draw. No. Knight to E6. King to B2. And then the key move, of course, knight to C5. And this is where white is doomed. So now you just bring in the king. King. You could even go here. D3. So he goes back. King comes over. King has to go to A2, and you can figure it out from there. Well, folks, that ends this game. I hope you enjoyed it. I think this is a Carl's time. I think this is his chance to move way ahead, and I wish him well. And I want you to remember, folks, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. And I hope to see all of you in the next video. Please subscribe and please comment. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.